Well, I'm Dan Harris, and I'm a beekeeper. I am going to talk a few minutes about making sugar syrup for either new hive, new start, splits, swarms, or whatever. My purpose is in feeding my bees, and especially in the spring, but in the fall too for different reasons, is to supplement in the spring the incoming nectar in those new hives and get those bees to produce as much wax as possible so that their nest, so they can successfully build their nest and provision it for the upcoming winter. So that's my mission in the spring. And what I'm doing right now is feeding I've got probably about 40 early season splits I made that many of them have already drawn out. Today is Today is May 17th. I made those 40 splits the first week of April. Most of them have drawn out. They started out with like 5 frames of drawn comb, so they've drawn out the additional 15 deep frames to make a double deep by now. Most of them have done that. I'm also got 16 queens coming next week, this upcoming week. So I'm actually splitting hives as I speak. Well, not as I speak, but in general, that's what I'm doing today. But I'm also feeding, and I'll be supplementally feeding those. And then I've caught probably about 10 swarms, and I feed them, and most of them, well, the earlier ones have pretty much completed filling out their double deep boxes, but I still have a handful. I actually have some that I just caught in the last week. So, you know, it's a mix of things. So the long and short of it is I typically this time of year probably am feeding bees up to at least, well, on average, 20 to 30 new colonies. And so I try to give them about a gallon of 1-to-1 syrup a week as a supplemental thing, and they really, they tend to take it down and put it to work, put it to good use. So that's what I'm doing right now, and I use 1-to-1 sugar syrup. This is traditional, and I know if you have followed the literature, you'll see that I think it was Randy Oliver that determined that feeding 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 didn't impact the amount of wax that the bees produce, so you can feed either one. I still go with tradition. Not just because it's tradition, but because there's a century or more of beekeepers' observation that supports the 1-to-1 idea. And if I add to that, it just kind of makes intuitive sense to me. So 1-to-1. So here's how I do that. And then 2-to-1, it's the same idea, but just a different mix ratios. If you look down here, you'll see 4 bags, 25-pound bags of sugar, and you'll see the remnants of the last 2 batches I made. And over here, you'll see my 25-gallon honey bottling tank. And of course, there's some empty 1-gallon containers. And I'm not going to mix this up before your eyes. I'm just going to explain to you how I do it. Right now there is about 12 gallons of water in this bottling tank. I would tell you that if you're a new beekeeper or maybe an experienced beekeeper who is wanting to expand and have not yet bought a double-walled bottling tank, it's a great investment. And this particular one is a 25-gallon tank. They make 40-plus gallon tanks, make them even bigger than that, but I'm talking about for relatively small scale operators like I am. I've got 100 and I don't know how many hives, but for the smaller scale, maybe the sideliner, this is not a bad size. 40-plus gallon you can get, and then you can also get smaller than 25 gallon. But whatever you choose, it's a pretty good investment, not only for bottling honey, which it's great for, but also, in my experience, for mixing up sugar syrup. I also have a 3-gallon pail, and I use that to mix up both 2-to-1 and 1-to-1 syrup. And roughly the way I've done it, if you think about it, a gallon of water weighs about 8 pounds. So I put 12 gallons of water in the tank. I fill that 4 times, That gives me 12 gallons of water. 12 times 8 is 96. And I stir in 100 pounds of sugar, those 4 25-pound bags of sugar that I showed you a second ago. And that should make something very close to 1-to-1 sugar syrup. I also, when I make 2-to-1, I use the same 3-gallon pail and I fill it 3 times, which gives me 9 gallons. That's 9 times 8, 72. So that's 72 pounds of water. And I'll put in 150 pounds of sugar. And that'll give me a 2-to-1. I have this stirring stick that I used to stir it that came from like a winemaking supply and beer supply, a beer making and a winemaking supply outfit. And I use that to stir it. As you'll see, we're in the process of heating the water. This is the beauty of the jacketed tank. And it looks like we're pretty close to 150 degrees. And 150 degrees is about where I want it to be to stir in 1-to-1. And I want maybe 160 to 170 degrees to stir in 2-to-1. And I'll let you look in the tank just because it just has the water in it at the moment. But you can see, you know, it's about half full of water. So then I'll add in that 100 pounds. I'll stir in that 100 pounds of sugar. So there you go. That's how I make my sugar syrup. And that's why if you're, like I say, you're a small beekeeper, but you're trying to expand and you want to make sugar syrup to feed your new starts or your overwintering colonies to build up their stores, and you want to do it a little more efficiently, this is a good way to do it. And rather than trying to stir it in 5-gallon pails. Just a follow-up on my syrup making earlier part of the video. Well, follow up on the syrup making. Wanted to show you, it's 2 days after I stirred up the 100 pounds of sugar and 12 gallons of water. Hopefully, you can also see, there it is. That's what it looks like in the tank. You can see it's a 25-gallon tank, so I don't know where 25 gallons actually comes to on it. I've never really tested it, but it's certainly more than 20 gallons and a little less than 25. Again, that's 12 gallons of water and 100 pounds of sugar. That's 1-to-1 syrup. So, all right, we're going to bottle it. Once again, I went to a winemaking supply house, bought a nice big funnel. And it's just, I go pretty easy to start with because it gets a little crazy. And as I say, this will make somewhere around 21, 22 gallons. So if you are in a need of a medium amount of sugar syrup, more than you mix in a 5-gallon pail, but you don't need a tank or truck full, this is a pretty good option.